Across the cold silence of space, the battle was already lost. Flames and debris drifted where once a proud Alliance fleet had stood. Ships from 10 different species had joined together, hoping to crush the enemy armada. But hope had turned into screams, and the stars burned red with defeat. On the alien command channel, orders repeated over and over: activate escape pods. Await rescue. Do not engage. It was the universal protocol, a law followed by every known race. When the ship falls, you run. You save yourself. You wait for someone else to come. Every escape pod launched in perfect rhythm, tiny metal seeds scattering into darkness. Inside each, trembling survivors held their breath and prayed that someone, anyone, would pick them up. But one signal refused to follow the pattern. On the human ship Dauntless, alarms wailed, and the hull split open. The crew was gone, dead or dying, except for a single escape pod that had just launched from the lower deck. The pod shot into space, spinning, surrounded by smoke and burning metal. The enemy sensors locked on, ready to destroy it. But then the small pod did something no one could believe. It stopped. And then, it turned around. In the alien command ship, General Vurock of the Cerethi watched the readings in disbelief. "That can't be right," he muttered, his scaled fingers tightening on the console. "The human pod is reversing thrust." His second-in-command leaned closer. "Maybe it's damaged, sir." But the readings were clear. The pod had powered its thrusters, pointed itself directly toward the enemy lines, and was now accelerating. Across the fleet, alien officers stared at their screens in confusion. "They're going back," someone whispered. "But the protocols..." No one finished the sentence. The idea itself made no sense. No species had ever done that. Escape pods were meant for survival, not for combat. Inside the human pod, 3 figures sat strapped into their seats. Their faces were blackened with smoke, their armor cracked and dented. Sergeant Hale, his hands steady despite the shaking, stared at the navigation display. "If we go back, we die," one of the others said quietly. Hale smiled, a tired, grim smile. "Maybe. But our commander's still on that ship. And he didn't order us to wait." The others said nothing. In silence, they began switching the pod from rescue mode to manual control. Systems protested. Warnings flashed red. The pod wasn't built for this kind of flight. It wasn't meant to turn, fight, or survive in battle. But humans had never been good at doing what they were meant to do. Outside, the pod's thrusters roared to life, burning bright against the black. Enemy ships noticed immediately. Their gunners laughed, seeing a single escape pod charging toward their cruisers. One fired a plasma bolt. It missed. Another fired again, and the pod twisted at the last second, using debris as cover. The small craft moved like it had a will of its own. The aliens watching from safe distance felt something strange. Fear. Not of the pod itself, but of what it represented. The humans weren't running. They weren't waiting for rescue. They were going back into the fire. General Vurock couldn't look away. "Why?" he whispered. "What do they think they'll achieve?" On his screen, the pod's signal flickered as it neared the wreck of the human flagship, the Dauntless. The massive ship was torn in half, its reactor dead, its guns silent. But still, the pod kept going, like a spark drawn to dying coals. Hale and his team could feel the heat rising through the hull. The outer layers were burning away, the shields screaming under pressure. "Almost there," shouted one of them. The moment they reached the wreck, the pod slammed against the docking bay doors. Metal crumpled. Sparks filled the air. The impact should have killed them, but somehow, the hatch blew open, and the soldiers crawled into the ship's dark interior. The air inside was hot, heavy with smoke and ash. The ship groaned like a wounded animal. Hale took off his helmet and looked down the dark corridor. "Let's bring her back," he said. The others nodded. Somewhere in the distance, a faint hum began, power lines trying to restart. On the alien fleet monitors, the Dauntless beacon suddenly flickered. Then again. And again. "Sir," shouted an officer to General Vurock. The human flagship, it's powering up. The general leaned forward, eyes wide. That's impossible. It's dead. But the readings didn't lie. The ship's lights were coming online. Weak at first, then stronger. Within minutes, the flagship's cannons glowed red again. Across the galaxy, no one spoke. The escape pods, scattered across the void, floated silently. Survivors from a dozen races watched their screens in disbelief as the human's dead ship began to move. Slowly, but unmistakably, the Dauntless turned. Not away from battle. Toward it. In that moment, something shifted, not just in the war, but in every heart watching. The humans had broken the oldest rule in the stars. They refused to run. They refused to wait. They were going back. And no one, not even the enemy, knew what would happen next. The enemy scanners caught it first. A faint movement inside the wreck of the human flagship, something impossible, something that should not exist. Confirm that reading, barked the enemy captain aboard the dreadnought Vexera. His officers exchanged nervous looks. It's real, sir. A power surge inside the human ship. The captain narrowed his eyes. Impossible. That vessel was destroyed. But the sensors didn't lie. Deep inside the half-dead ship, systems were flickering back to life. The Dauntless, once silent and broken, was breathing again. Inside, Sergeant Hale and his small team pushed through the smoke-filled corridors. The lights were dim, flickering between red emergency flashes and darkness. Every step echoed through the empty ship like footsteps in a tomb. Main power junctions ahead, Hale said, coughing through the dust. If we can get the backup reactors online, we might get her to respond. His comrade, Private Lin, looked doubtful. Even if we get power, sir, the engines are gone. We can't fly this wreck. Hale's voice stayed calm. We're not flying it. We're fighting from it. They reached the main control chamber, half melted, walls scorched, glass cracked from explosions. Hale pulled a half-burned cable from a console and began reconnecting circuits. Sparks flew, the lights flickered, and somewhere deep in the ship, a low hum began. The Dauntless was waking up. Outside, the enemy fleet adjusted formation. They're reactivating the ship's core, one of the alien gunners reported. Should we destroy it completely? The captain considered. No. Let's watch what they're trying to do. Humans. Always curious creatures. But curiosity turned to fear when the first blast came. A single plasma cannon, once thought dead, fired. The bolt tore through an enemy frigate that had drifted too close. The alien bridge crew froze in horror. They fired. That ship's firing again. Inside the Dauntless, Hale stared at the glowing cannon displays. Weapons online, Lin said in disbelief. I can't believe it. Hale smiled. Believe it. Now let's give them something to remember. Across the battlefield, survivors inside alien escape pods saw it happen. The human ship, cracked open, bleeding metal, suddenly lit up like a rising sun. It turned slowly, its guns glowing bright orange. The broken flagship was not dying. It was fighting back. This is madness, muttered General Vurock aboard the Cerethi command vessel. They're supposed to be awaiting rescue, not charging into death. His aide shook his head. Humans don't wait for rescue, sir. They are the rescue. The general said nothing. On every open channel, whispers began to spread. The human's ship was alive. Their soldiers had gone back. And they were taking the fight to the enemy again. Inside the Dauntless, the crew fought not just the enemy, but the ship itself. Fires still burned in the lower decks. Hull breaches opened into the vacuum of space. Oxygen levels dropped fast, but still, they moved. Hale dragged a power cable across the floor, connecting what was left of the shield generator. Give me status, he shouted. Weapons at 30%, Lin replied. Engines, 20, maybe. Hull integrity, don't even ask. Good enough, Hale said. He turned to the central command seat, where the dead body of their captain still sat, eyes open, frozen in place. Hale saluted once. "Sir, we're not done yet." He reached over, pressed a key, and the ship's communication system came alive with static. "This is Sergeant Hale of the Dauntless. To all surviving vessels, if you can hear this, fight. Don't wait. Don't flee. Fight with us." Across the dark, scattered escape pods lit up as survivors heard the voice. Some thought it was a ghost transmission. Others wept. But deep down, they felt it, the pull of courage. The idea that maybe, just maybe, they could turn back too. In the enemy fleet, panic spread. "They're rallying survivors," the captain of the Vexera hissed. "Cut their transmission." But it was too late. The message had already gone out. The broken ship's guns roared again, hammering 2 more enemy cruisers. Hale's team cheered, though they knew it wouldn't last long. The power cells were draining fast, the shields almost gone. Yet something powerful filled that ship, something no other species could measure. Resolve. Outside, the enemy fleet regrouped. Dozens of ships locked weapons on the crippled human flagship. "End it," the alien captain ordered coldly. A swarm of plasma bolts tore through space, striking the Dauntless. Explosions ripped across its hull, decks collapsing one by one. The bridge shook violently, throwing Hale to the ground. "Shields down," Lynn shouted. "We can't take another hit." Hale forced himself up. "Then we'll give them one first." He hit the firing control again. The main gun lit up, energy surging through it with a deep, thunderous pulse. One final shot tore through the darkness, slamming straight into the enemy dreadnought. The explosion was so bright it blinded every scanner within range. For a moment, silence. Then static. When the light faded, both ships were gone, vanished into a cloud of fire and debris. The watching aliens could only stare in stunned silence. On the command bridge of the Cerethi fleet, General Vurock lowered his head. "They didn't run," he said softly. "They turned back." And in that moment, something shifted in every soldier's heart. Across the void, the human signal still echoed through broken comms, faint but steady. "Don't flee. Fight." It was more than a message. It was a challenge. The impossible return of the humans had begun. The wreck of the Dauntless drifted silently in space, surrounded by clouds of burning metal. The stars around it flickered through the haze, reflecting off the broken hull. For most, the battle was over. For humans, it had only just begun. Deep inside the shattered ship, the emergency lights glowed faintly. Sparks danced across the walls as Sergeant Hale dragged himself out from under a fallen beam. His armor was dented, his face covered in blood and dust, but his eyes burned with the same fire that had kept the ship alive. "Report," he croaked through the smoke. Lynn's voice came weak but clear through the comlink. "Still here, sir. Barely. Reactors offline again, but some systems are still responding." Hale looked around the ruined control deck. Half the consoles were melted, the others sparking with failing power. "Then we bring her back again," he said, coughing hard. "One more time." The small team moved through the dark corridors, using handlights and instinct. Each step echoed through the dead ship, reminding them how alone they were. Outside, the enemy fleet was regrouping, preparing to move on. They believed the humans were finished, that no one could survive such destruction. But they didn't understand what humans were made of. Hale reached the secondary engineering bay, where the smell of smoke and fuel filled the air. The ship's core was cracked but still pulsing faintly, like a dying heart refusing to stop. "We can use the emergency bypass," Lynn said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If we redirect power from the weapons, maybe we can bring the life support back." Hale nodded. "Do it. We're not done." 4 hours, they worked with burned hands and fading oxygen, patching broken systems and rerouting energy through melted circuits. Each time the lights flickered, it gave them a little more hope. The Dauntless began to breathe again, piece by piece. In the distance, the alien rescue fleets monitored the battlefield. General Vurock stood on the observation deck of his cruiser, watching the human wreck through magnified scans. "The humans are still alive," his aide said in disbelief. "That ship should be cold by now." Vurock's expression was grim. "They don't follow our logic. They fight even when logic says to die." Around them, murmurs spread through the alien crew. Many had lost their own comrades in the battle, and yet the sight of that single broken human ship still resisting filled them with a strange, dangerous hope. In the dauntless control bay, Hale finally reconnected the main terminal. The ship's voice system crackled weakly. "Warning, reactor stability at 11%. Hull breach in Sector 7. Hale smiled faintly. "She's talking again." Lynn laughed tiredly. "Barely." Hale placed his hand on the console, whispering like the ship could hear him. "You're not done yet, girl. Not while we're still breathing." Then the impossible happened. A deep hum vibrated through the deck. The backup core came online, slowly building energy. Systems began to light up one by one: navigation, thrusters, targeting control. The Dauntless was alive again. Outside, enemy sensors detected the surge. "Sir," reported an officer aboard the Vexera's sister ship. "The human vessel. It's moving." The captain frowned. "Moving? It's a wreck." "Yes, sir. But it's changing orientation. It's turning." The captain leaned closer to the holographic display, disbelief spreading across his face. The Dauntless, blackened and torn in half, was rotating slowly, aiming its surviving cannons toward the enemy line. The aliens couldn't comprehend it. The ship had no reason to move, no chance to win, yet it was doing both. Hale and Lynn strapped themselves into their seats, the sound of straining metal echoing through the hull. "All right," Hale said quietly. "Let's give them a reason to remember us." With a deep groan, the Dauntless engines fired. The entire ship shuddered, but it moved forward, inch by inch, into the storm. The few working cannons began to glow red again, charging for another strike. The humans weren't trying to escape. They were charging back into the fight. General Vurock watched in stunned silence. "They're attacking again," his aide whispered. "After everything, they still fight." "No," Vurock said softly. "They never stopped." Across the broken fleets, messages spread between ships. Alien commanders who had fled now turned back, inspired by what they were seeing. "If the humans can stand," one said, "so can we." And for the first time in hours, the Allied fleet began to move again. Inside the Dauntless, the temperature rose. Warnings screamed from every console. "Core temperature critical." Lynn shouted. "We'll blow if we keep this up." Hale's voice was steady. "Then we blow with purpose." The ship's main cannon locked on to the nearest enemy cruiser. Fire! A beam of energy erupted from the broken hull, slicing through the cruiser's shields and detonating it in a burst of light. The explosion shook the stars. "Direct hit," Lynn yelled. Hale nodded, his face lit by the glow of fire outside. "Good. Let's keep going." But as the Dauntless pushed forward, the hull began to crack further. Panels fell, air hissed out of the ship, and systems started to die again. Hale looked around the bridge. "If this is it," he said quietly, "we make it count." The last thing the enemy saw before losing radar contact was a half-destroyed human warship diving straight into the heart of their formation, guns blazing, defying every law of survival. And in that moment, every watching soldier, human or alien, understood why humans turned their escape pods back. It wasn't about victory. It was about never accepting defeat. The enemy formation broke apart like shattered glass as the Dauntless came alive once more. The burned, half-destroyed human flagship was not just surviving, it was attacking. Its thrusters screamed, its guns roared, and its crew refused to die. In the center of the chaos, Sergeant Hale stood at the cracked bridge console, sweat dripping down his face as alarms echoed around him. "Weapons ready," he shouted over the noise. Lynn's hands flew across the melted controls. "As ready as they'll ever be." 2 cannons charged, but the third's fried. Hale grinned grimly. Two's all we need. The Dauntless rolled forward, flames trailing from its hull like wings of fire. The alien dreadnoughts tried to close in, forming a defensive wall, but the humans didn't stop. Their ship, barely holding together, punched straight through the line. Plasma bolts struck its armor, tearing holes across the sides, yet the cannons kept firing. The first enemy ship exploded in a storm of molten metal, the second's engines failed, sending it spiraling into debris. On the distant Cerethi command ship, General Vurock and his officers watched in stunned silence. "They've lost everything," Vurock said softly. "No shields, no reinforcements, no escape route." His aide's voice trembled. "And yet they're winning." Across the communication networks, scattered survivors from the Allied fleets began to pick up fragments of the human transmissions, voices filled with static but unbroken resolve. "To all ships, this is the Dauntless. Do not retreat, stand and fight." The message carried across the stars, echoing into the hearts of soldiers who had long given up. One by one, alien captains made their choice. Engines flared to life. Ships turned back toward the battle. For the first time since the war began, courage spread faster than fear. Inside the Dauntless, Hale braced himself as another impact shook the bridge. A console exploded beside him, throwing Lynn to the floor. "You good?" Hale shouted. Lynn groaned but gave a thumbs up. "Still breathing. Then get up. We've got more targets." Outside the viewport, the battlefield was chaos, fire, wreckage, and light. The enemy's main carrier loomed ahead, massive and armored, a monster of metal. Hale pointed toward it. "That's our next one." Lynn hesitated. "Sir, that ship could crush us in one shot." Hale's voice was calm. "Then let's make sure they don't get that shot." The Dauntless turned sharply, its engines flaring white-hot as it charged straight for the carrier. Enemy gunners opened fire, filling space with plasma and debris, but the humans kept pushing. The carrier's commander watched in disbelief. "That ship should be dead. How are they still moving?" His sensor officer swallowed hard. "Sir, the humans have overclocked their core. They're burning everything, fuel, oxygen, even hull plating, for thrust." The commander's face twisted. "They'll destroy themselves." "Yes, sir," the officer said quietly. "That's the point." The Dauntless tore through the enemy fire, closing the gap fast. Hale gritted his teeth. "Prepare the forward cannons." Lynn looked at the display, energy levels dropping, systems failing. "We've got one shot, maybe two." "Then make them count." Hale placed his hand on the trigger control. "For the Dauntless. For Earth." The first blast ripped through the carrier's shields, cracking open its outer hull. The second hit something vital, a reactor line. A blinding flash consumed the ship as it erupted in a massive explosion, fragments scattering across the void. The shockwave slammed into the Dauntless, throwing Hale and his team to the ground. The bridge went dark again, systems failing one by one. Smoke filled the air. Hale coughed, blinking through the haze. "Status." Lynn coughed hard. "Reactors burning out. Hull integrity below 10%. We can't take much more." Hale looked out the cracked viewport. The enemy fleet was in disarray. Some ships were retreating, others were firing blindly. "We did it," Lynn whispered. "We actually turned the tide." Hale didn't answer. He stared into the firestorm, watching the destruction they had unleashed. "Not yet," he said finally. "They'll regroup. They always do." On the other side of the battlefield, General Vurock was already issuing new orders. "Allied ships, follow the human lead. Press the attack. Push them back." His officers hesitated. "Sir, the humans won't survive this." Vurock's expression hardened. "They already knew that. The least we can do is make their sacrifice matter." All across the sector, ships rejoined the fight. Alien vessels of every shape and color surged forward beside the burning Dauntless, firing together, united by one act of defiance. Inside the human ship, alarms continued to scream. Lin's voice cracked. "We've got a reactor breach, sir. We need to eject." Hale looked at the escape pod control, then back at the burning stars outside. "No. Not this time." He smiled faintly, remembering the first time he heard the protocol, "Await rescue." The words seemed meaningless now. "Tell me," Hale said softly, "what's the point of waiting for rescue when you can be the reason others are saved?" Lin didn't answer. He just smiled through the smoke. "Then let's finish this, sir." The Dauntless engines flared one last time, pushing the ship forward into the heart of the enemy fleet. Every gun, every cannon, every last reserve of energy poured into a single final assault. From a distance, it looked like a dying star exploding back to life. And as the Dauntless plunged deeper into the storm, its signal continued to broadcast, a message that would echo through every surviving ship: "Humans don't flee. We fight." The battlefield burned brighter than any sun. The wrecks of hundreds of ships drifted silently, their fires painting the darkness red and gold. In the middle of it all, the human flagship Dauntless still moved, half destroyed yet unstoppable. Its armor peeled away in molten streams, its engines howled like dying beasts, but it refused to fall. Inside, Sergeant Hale stood gripping the command console, his knuckles white as he stared at the screen. Every sensor warning was flashing red. Reactor unstable. Hull breach. Oxygen critical. But none of it mattered anymore. They had already gone further than anyone thought possible. "Sir," Lin said weakly from beside him, his face streaked with soot. "The main power lines are gone. We've got no shields left." Hale nodded slowly. "Then we won't need them." He looked through the cracked viewport at the enemy fleet regrouping ahead. Massive dreadnoughts were turning to face the Dauntless, their weapons charging, their confidence returning. The humans had wounded the beast, but now it was coming back with fury. Hale knew this was it. The end. "How many cannons still working?" he asked. Lin checked the flickering display. "One main gun, one secondary." "That's it." Hale smiled faintly. "That'll do." Outside, the ship drifted through debris fields and broken hulls, flames licking across its sides. The enemy fleet scanners tracked it nervously. "The human ship is still operational," one alien officer reported. His captain shook his head in disbelief. "How?" "They have no power, no life signs, nothing but wreckage." The officer stared at the readings. "Sir, they're charging their main gun again." Silence filled the enemy bridge. Then panic. "Fire everything!" the captain shouted. "Destroy them now!" The first volley of plasma bolts tore through space, slamming into the Dauntless. The hull screamed as it broke apart piece by piece. Metal twisted, decks collapsed, flames filled every corridor. Lin was thrown from his seat, hitting the floor hard. Hale pulled him up, coughing through the smoke. "Stay with me. We can't keep this up," Lin shouted. Hale's eyes hardened. "We're not trying to keep it up. We're trying to finish it." He staggered toward the main controls, hands shaking, and entered a series of manual overrides. The ship's voice responded weakly, "Warning, reactor overload imminent." "Good," Hale whispered. He looked at Lin. "We're taking them with us." Lin hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." The enemy dreadnoughts closed in, their weapons glowing bright blue. They were preparing the final strike to erase the Dauntless once and for all. But before they could fire, the human ship moved again, engines burning with a light too bright to look at. The Dauntless surged forward, straight into the enemy formation. It wasn't flying anymore, it was falling, deliberately, like a dying star pulled by vengeance instead of gravity. Inside, alarms wailed, bulkheads ruptured, and the deck shook with every impact. Lin held onto the console as sparks rained from above. "We're losing everything," he yelled. Hale laughed softly, a sound half mad and half proud. "We already lost everything. Now we make it mean something." He activated the main gun manually, bypassing every safety system. The weapon core glowed like molten fire, energy building far beyond its limit. The heat was unbearable. The walls melted around them. But Hale didn't stop. He looked at the photo taped to the console, a group of smiling faces, the crew before the war, and whispered, "For all of you." Outside, the dauntless cannon fired. The beam tore through the lead enemy dreadnought, splitting it in half. The explosion ripped across the fleet like a chain reaction, igniting nearby ships. One by one, the enemy vessels began to explode, each one consumed by the fire of the last. The sky itself seemed to shatter. On the Allied frequencies, voices screamed in disbelief. "The human ship, it's still fighting. It's taking them down with it." General Vurock stared at the view from his command deck, unable to speak. The Dauntless was gone from radar, lost inside a blinding wave of light. Then, in the static of his comms, a faint voice broke through, crackling, distorted, but unmistakably human. "To all who hear this, do not flee. Do not wait. We are the shield. We are the fire." The signal cut out, replaced by silence. The enemy fleet was burning, breaking apart under the force of the humans' final strike. The Dauntless was gone, consumed by the explosion it had created. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Vurock whispered, "They chose death over retreat." His aide nodded, eyes wide. "They didn't escape, sir. They became the rescue." Across the Allied fleets, soldiers listened to the last echo of the human transmission. Some cried. Some saluted. And some, inspired by what they had witnessed, turned their ships back toward the battle. What began as one human ship's act of defiance became a spark that reignited an entire war. The Dauntless was gone, but its legend was just beginning. In the quiet after the fire, the sensors of a nearby scout ship caught something strange, a faint signal pulsing from the edge of the debris field. It was weak, almost lost among the static, but it repeated the same line again and again. "If you're still alive, fight." The debris field was silent, drifting slowly through the cold void. Wrecks of alien and human ships floated side by side, locked forever in their final battle. The Dauntless was gone, or so everyone believed. But deep within the largest cluster of twisted metal, a faint light flickered. It pulsed weakly, like the heartbeat of something refusing to die. Inside what remained of the Dauntless' forward section, a single emergency pod had somehow survived the explosion. Systems flickered in and out of power, and the air was thick with smoke and frost. Sergeant Hale's eyes opened slowly. Pain shot through every part of his body, and for a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then it all came rushing back, the explosion, the light, the fall. He groaned, pushing a piece of metal off his chest. "Lynn, you alive?" There was no response. He turned his head and saw Lynn slumped over his console, motionless. Hale dragged himself closer and checked his pulse. Weak, but there. "You stubborn fool," Hale muttered with a faint smile. He tore a wire from a broken panel and sparked a weak field light. The cabin illuminated in flashes of blue and red, showing the destruction around them. Only a small part of the bridge was intact, everything else was gone. The life support system hummed weakly, barely holding. The comms console sparked and flickered to life for a moment. A distorted voice came through the static. "Human signal detected, debris sector 7. Confirm." Hale's heart jumped. "Rescue." He reached for the console, fingers trembling. "This is Sergeant Hale of the Dauntless. We're alive. Repeat, we're alive." The signal crackled, then cut off completely. Silence returned. Hale slammed his fist against the console. "Come on, don't die on me now." The power flickered again, but it was no use. They were stranded. He looked at Lynn, then out the viewport at the wreckage floating around them. The stars looked peaceful, uncaring. Hale laughed softly. "We saved them all, and now we die here. Fitting." He leaned back, trying to rest, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Something felt wrong. The wreckage field should have been quiet, but there was movement out there. Small lights drifting between the destroyed ships. Hale narrowed his eyes. "That's no rescue team." He grabbed a damaged scope from the floor and pointed it toward the lights. His stomach tightened. They weren't friendly. Scavenger drones. Enemy machines designed to pick apart wrecks and finish off survivors. The alien empire used them to erase all traces of their losses. Hale knew what that meant. They were coming to make sure the humans were truly dead. He shook Lin awake. "Hey, wake up. We've got company." Lin stirred weakly, coughing. "Company?" Hale pointed out the window. "Enemy drones. They're cleaning up the field. We need to move." Lin looked around the shattered cabin. "Move? With what?" Hale didn't answer. He tore open a panel and dragged out an emergency power cell. "We've still got one working pod thruster. If I can reroute the cell, we might get a short burst, enough to hide inside the wreckage." Lin stared at him. "That's suicide." Hale grinned faintly. "Yeah, but better than waiting to be vaporized." They worked quickly, hands shaking, sweat freezing on their foreheads. Sparks flew as they reconnected wires and bypassed burned circuits. The drones were getting closer now, their red sensors sweeping across the darkness like predators sniffing blood. Hale could hear them, the faint hum of their engines vibrating through the hull. Finally, the system flickered green. "Now!" he shouted. The pod lurched forward, metal grinding against metal as it forced its way out of the wreckage. The sudden motion sent pain shooting through their bodies, but it worked. The pod drifted behind a massive piece of armor plating, out of sight. Hale killed the power. The pod went dark, hiding them in the shadow of the debris. Seconds later, a drone passed right by, scanning the area with beams of blue light. Hale and Lin held their breath. The beam stopped for a moment, directly over their hiding spot. Hale gripped a broken metal bar, ready to fight if needed. The light moved on. They exhaled quietly. The drones continued their silent work, tearing apart the remains of ships, gathering black boxes, destroying evidence. Hale watched in fury. "They don't even honor the dead." Lin whispered. "What do we do now?" Hale stared into the darkness, his jaw tight. "We finish what we started." He powered the scope again, scanning the enemy ships still orbiting the battlefield. Most were damaged, but one remained mostly intact, a command frigate coordinating the cleanup. If they could reach it, they could send a message to their fleet. "We're taking their ship," Hale said. Lin blinked. "You're insane." "Maybe," Hale replied. "But it's that or die here forgotten." They waited until the drones moved away, then reignited the pod's thrusters, slow, quiet bursts. The tiny craft drifted between wrecks, hidden by shadows. Every second was a gamble. If a drone turned too soon, they were finished. But somehow, they made it to the edge of the enemy frigate's perimeter. The massive ship loomed ahead, its hull scarred from battle. Hale looked at Lin. "Ready." Lin laughed weakly. "Not even a little." "Good," Hale said. "Let's go." They fired the pod's last thruster burst, ramming into the frigate's lower docking bay. The impact tore the pod open, but they were inside the ship's hull. Hale grabbed a weapon from the emergency rack, his breath steady. "We fought them once out there," he said quietly. "Now we finish it in here." Lin nodded. "Let's make the Dauntless proud." The door hissed open, smoke and sparks filling the air. Two battered humans stepped out of the wrecked pod and into the heart of the enemy ship, ready to bring the fight back to those who thought they were dead. The docking bay was dim and silent, filled with the low hum of alien machinery. The air smelled of burnt metal and cold fuel. Hale and Lin crouched behind a pile of cargo crates, weapons drawn, breathing heavily. Their pod lay in ruins behind them, torn open from the crash. Above, faint blue lights pulsed along the ceiling, security sensors scanning the area in slow, rhythmic sweeps. Lin whispered, "We can't stay here long. They'll send a patrol." Hale nodded, his eyes fixed on a doorway leading deeper into the ship. "We find the command center. Send a message to the fleet. If we're lucky, they'll pick it up." Lin gave a weak laugh. "If we're lucky, We won't die in the next 10 minutes. Hale smirked. That's the spirit. They waited for the scanners to turn away, then moved fast and low. The alien hallways were strange, curved, almost organic, with walls that seemed to pulse faintly as if the ship itself were alive. Every step echoed too loudly. Every breath felt like it might give them away. Hale motioned for Lin to stop as two enemy soldiers passed at the far end of the corridor. Their armor shimmered with a faint green glow, and they spoke in harsh clicks that echoed down the hall. Hale waited until they turned a corner, then moved again. "We need a map," Lin muttered. Hale pointed to a nearby terminal. There. The screen was in alien script, unreadable to most, but humans had fought these creatures long enough to recognize their systems. Hale began typing quickly, his fingers moving through memory. Come on, come on." The terminal flickered, then displayed a holographic layout of the ship. Lin leaned closer. "That's the bridge." He pointed to a glowing chamber near the ship's core. "But look, security nodes along every route. We'll trip alarms no matter what." Hale nodded grimly. "Then we make it count." He memorized the path, shut down the screen, and motioned to move. They moved deeper, passing through maintenance shafts and power corridors. The further they went, the louder the ship's heartbeat-like hum became. It was unsettling, almost alive. At one point, Lin paused and looked at the walls. "You hear that?" Hale stopped. Beneath the hum, there was another sound, metal scraping, faint whispers, like voices carried through the vents. He frowned. "Keep moving. Don't listen to it." But Lin's expression stayed uneasy. "This ship isn't normal." "None of them are," Hale muttered. "That's why we're here." They reached a control node guarded by two alien officers. Hale gestured silently. Lin nodded. They moved with precision, one covering, the other advancing. 2 quick shots, muffled and deadly, and the guards were down. Hale dragged the bodies aside and accessed the node. "This controls internal comms," he whispered. "If we can reroute the system, we can broadcast." "To who?" Lin asked. "Anyone still out there," Hale said. "If even one allied ship hears us, they'll know we're not dead." As he worked, Lin watched the corridor nervously. "We're running out of time." Hale didn't look up. "We've been out of time since the Dauntless exploded." The console beeped. "Done." Suddenly, alarms blared through the ship, red lights flashing across the walls. Hale cursed under his breath. They found the bodies. The hum of boots echoed down the hall. Dozens of alien soldiers were converging. Lin raised his weapon. "Guess we make our stand here." Hale shook his head. "Not yet. We move." They sprinted down a side corridor as plasma bolts scorched the walls behind them. The air filled with smoke and heat. Hale dove through a doorway and sealed it with a manual lock. "They'll cut through in minutes," Lin said. "Then we keep going." Ahead was a long maintenance tunnel leading toward the ship's central spine. It was dark, filled with steam and machinery. They crawled through the narrow passage, every movement echoing like thunder in their ears. Behind them, the sound of metal being cut open grew closer. "Almost there," Hale muttered. They emerged into a small chamber filled with glowing cables and humming reactors. In the center stood a vertical shaft leading straight up. "That's the core route," Hale said. "It'll take us to the bridge." "How do we climb it?" Lin asked, looking at the sheer metal walls. Hale pointed at the magnetic lifts along the side. "Old tech. We can use it." They attached their belts to the lift rail and activated it. Slowly, the system began pulling them upward, past layer after layer of humming machinery. The deeper they went into the ship, the more alien it felt, like climbing through the veins of a living creature. Halfway up, the lift jolted. Lin gripped tighter. "They're disabling the system." Hale gritted his teeth. "Hold on." The lift screeched and slowed, then stopped completely. Below, movement, figures climbing after them, fast and agile. "We've got company." Lin shouted. Hale pulled his pistol and fired down the shaft. Blue sparks lit the air as shots hit the pursuing soldiers. One fell, then another, but more were coming. Hale looked up. There's a service hatch above. Go. Lin reached it first and kicked it open, hauling himself through. Hale followed, rolling onto the deck just as enemy fire hit the hatch behind him. They sealed it shut and collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. That's the last easy part, Hale said, forcing a grim smile. Ahead of them was a large door glowing with alien symbols, the entrance to the bridge. Lin stared at it. This is it. Hale nodded. This is it. They both knew what came next. No turning back. No reinforcements. Just two broken soldiers against an entire ship. Hale reloaded his weapon, looked at Lin, and said quietly, "For the Dauntless." Lin returned the look, his voice steady. "For everyone who turned back." The door hissed open, flooding the corridor with harsh blue light. The bridge waited beyond, filled with enemy officers who turned in shock as two humans stepped out of the smoke, alive, armed, and ready to finish what they started.